Hi. Hi,
Hi.
Matilda. Hi,
Hi.
Amber. We
Hello,
have a
hello.
guest today.
Yes.
The second episode, and we have a guest. I mean, we're peaking already. This is amazing. Um, it was so fun to publish the pilot episode. It's been a while since we did that, and we have seen so much engagement online, haven't we, Matilda?
Definitely. I'm very, very proud of how people have been so involved and already gotten we've gotten into conversations about what we've been talking about. I had some lovely DMs from people commenting on certain aspects of the show that actually felt a little bit intimidating for me personally to share. Specifically, the whole being affected by false views on fantasy as a child and that sort of thing. I was scared people would be like, "Oh, she has been brainwashed" or something like that. But it was like the opposite reaction. It's been so positive. So
I
yeah,
do remember you, yeah, I do remember you being worried. You were like, "Is this too personal?" I'm like, "This
yeah.
is great." And it's great engagement. Like people can reflect themselves into that, and that's really cool. That's the part of this thing. Yeah, Amber.
Yeah, for my part, that really stood out to me because it I didn't notice it when I was reading that stuff as a youngster, but now as a mom, it really stands out to me. And so when you said that, I was like, wow, that really speaks to honestly part of why I love Tolkien. But it's something that I've absolutely noticed too, and more so as a mom.
So cool. That's really great. I'm gonna get into getting more introduction with you, Amber. I thought we would have a short summary of life since we did the pilot, and how has life been, Matilda?
Oh my goodness, we did our pilot back in February, so it took a
Right.
while, or
Oh,
March or
yeah.
something like that. It took a while before we actually dropped it. Well, I've had a great summer. Sadly, you couldn't come because you've been dealing with a lot of stuff,
Yeah.
which is amazing. You have been working so hard. Personally, I'm so proud of you. Like, applause.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
sadly, you couldn't come visit, which was the
Yeah.
plan originally, but I had a great summer. I visited some friends up north. I also just chilled with my daughter while my husband and son were on Greenland. I did a lot of reading. I've been diving into Tolkien more, and I've been doing a lot of pieces. Recently, I've been writing a lot about the influences in Tolkien from the Nordic countries, and also from Welsh culture. And I'm going to keep going until I feel like now we're pretty much exhausted, all of them.
Yeah.
And but the highlight of my year, like by far, was going to London for first, my daughter and I, who's 8, went to Matilda the musical, and that was just spectacular. But then on the Sunday, we went to For the Love of Fantasy in the Excel Arena, and we had an autograph and a meeting with Mordvid Clark. And yeah, I could talk a lot about this. I'm not going to go into the details. It was just like on a scale of meeting a stranger who's a celebrity, that was just the best imaginable encounter. It was so personal. It felt so genuine, and I just felt so safe, and I felt like she felt safe, and it was beautiful. Yeah. And
That's
what about
amazing.
you, Elisa? How's it been
No,
going? I
it's been
mean,
crazy. I mean, because I was thinking it took so long before we made the pilot until we published the pilot, and then now when we published the pilot, it took a while until we had the opportunity to sit down and do this. And it's just crazy. Life just throws things at you, and you just have to ride the waves and get through it. And so it's been a crazy year, but it's also been incredible. Um, and that's how it's going to be, I guess, with being mothers and having small children. And it's just, but I'm so glad that we finally get the chance to sit down and have and do more talking.
yeah, before we move on to you, Amber, I'm just going to ask you, Lisa. So, like, you have today, in like, while we're recording, who is around? A little
Who's
hobbit.
Oh yeah, yeah. My little hobbit, my 4-year-old son, he has a cold, so he's home from daycare, so he's around.
And I just find that quite beautiful, the fact that I mean, we have our lives. I was thinking about it. As I was stressing home
Oh.
from work. Here he is. Speaking of in Swedish, we don't say speaking of the devil, we say speaking of the trolls in Swedish.
I love that.
How beautiful it is that we are three moms with children who are reasonably young. And life isn't perfect. I was like stressing to myself, oh, I don't feel like I have the energy today. Oh, I don't feel like blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, chill. You're three moms. You're in like the same situation. It's going to be fine. Just chill, woman. Yeah.
So true.
Okay. Sorry.
So
Back to you, Lisa.
no, no, I kind of I'm so um intrigued by Amber right now. Like I haven't had the chance to talk about you or say a proper hi because you've met Matilda. You guys have talked.
Mhm.
I really want to know more about you. Who you tell me about yourself. Like who are you? What do you do? And how did you discover the amazing world of Tolkien? And your mother?
Yes. Yeah, I've a 1 4-year-old daughter.
Ah,
So I think same age as your son, right, Elisa?
yes,
Yeah. That's
so
so
cool.
when you were remembering we had an agreement, I was like, "Oh, I feel that." So I feel that in my soul right now.
Yeah. Oh, mothers, we understand each other. It's
We
like,
do. We do.
yeah.
Yeah. It's so fun and so much at the same time.
Yeah, it's a beautiful
Um,
mess being
it
a
is.
mother.
It is. Yeah. So my name is Amber and gosh, I don't really know where to start. I got into Tolkien as a youngster, I think like most of us. I first read The Hobbit when I was maybe in middle school, and then I didn't really get into Lord of the Rings until I was in high school. Um but I remember I was listening to your pilot episode and recounting when you guys first saw the Peter Jackson movies, and it just brought me right back to my experience watching The Fellowship for the first time. And my sister and I have a younger sister. She and I are both Tolkien fans, and so um, we actually went to San Francisco. There's this huge famous theater in San Francisco, the Metreon. So we went on opening day to the Metreon in San Francisco, and we got there like 3 hours early. So we were among the first in line. We were so ready, and then everybody starts filing in the theater, and someone pulled the fire alarm. I remember thinking,
My
No.
God.
I was thinking, okay, this is somebody who didn't plan ahead and didn't get their spot in line, but I have to hand it to him. This is kind of a genius move. So there was this complete reshuffling, and then we ended up being among the last back in the theater, which was like not a big deal at all because it ended up being just the experience of a lifetime. And I remember walking out of the theater feeling so sad to be like walking back to our world. Like I just wanted to stay. But yeah, so that I don't know, that really cemented it for me. And then but then life happens and you have less and less time for this stuff. And so I really didn't read much, wasn't, it just ceased to be a part of like my life really for a long time. And then Rings of Power came out. And then I got so excited. Like I was just like, I don't even care. Like I'm so excited to see an adaptation of Middle Earth. Like I don't even care what it looks like. I want to be back in that place. And then of course that just so much of what you guys were talking about resonated with me because it was like it rekindled that original wonder that I haven't felt for so long as an adult. And for the first time in my life, I've just been like, you know, I'm just going to go with this hyper focus. Like, I'm not going to feel any shame about this. And I'm just going to get way into this. And so I got back into the Silmarillion and I was pulling out all my old books and everything as I'm watching Rings of Power, I'm like, ooh, this reminds me of this thing. And I'm pulling that out. And then that gets me down the rabbit hole in this trajectory and that trajectory. And, um, you guys will laugh, but I told my therapist, I was like, this is so much fun. And, it's like, it's not productive. I'm not earning a paycheck. And I'm going off about like, but how awesome this is. And she just looked at me. She's like, yeah, that's called a hobby. I
I
was like,
love that. Oh, that's so amazing.
and I started laughing because I was like, oh my gosh, how have I gone this far into my adulthood without a hobby? And then I got so excited. I was like, I love this hobby. And here we are.
I relate 100% to you, Amber. This is so relatable. Um, yeah, because I went so many years focusing on career and working and doing these stuff that I forgot what it's like to just play and
Yeah,
just just have a little fun without big consequences, without
right.
there being something you have to a value that you can measure. That's
Mm-hmm.
like adult points. Like there's no
Right.
no there's no winning in that way. And
I
I've been
love that.
looking for that too in my life, not even knowing I was looking. And then now Tolkien's world is that for me too.
Mm-hmm.
Like just
I can just add there are no stakes in Tolkien. You can just go dive straight into it, and it's just this really perfect, warm and fluffy world, which
mhm,
makes me hopeful. Even though the world is crazy, even though the world is falling apart, literally at the moment,
Literally.
um, I just keep reminding myself of how much we can find inspiration and hope from the stories that are in his universe. And that was exactly what he intended. And I find that so
mm,
beautiful. I was just seeing a post today about the fact that he was at the Somme in France, the bloodiest battle of the First World War, millions
yeah,
dying around him. And in the middle of this chaos, when he contracted a disease and he had to be hospitalized, he started creating this universe in order to escape from it. Universe where death isn't scary. Death isn't.
Mm.
It shouldn't make us afraid. It should give us hope. It should be inspire us. And yeah, sorry for hijacking the conversation, but
No, I
I was just
love
really,
that.
I was just inspired about what the two of you just said. Yeah.
where are you located right now, Amber?
I'm in Finland actually. So, um, originally from the States, but our family is here for a semester sabbatical, and it has been amazing. Love it here.
Where from the States are you from?
We live in Connecticut. I was born in California and then grew up in Nevada, was back in California for school. Then my husband and I moved abroad to Austria for 6 years, and then we were back in Connecticut for a while, and now we're in Finland.
Amazing.
So
That's I never I would never guess Finland, but that's really cool.
May I
love it,
ask
yeah.
whereabouts in California did you live or did you grow up?
So I was born in Berkeley and then so in the Bay Area and then grew up in Reno, Nevada, and then went back to school at Stanford. So I was in the Bay Area again
Right, I
for
see. Yeah.
school, which is where I met my husband, and then we moved to Europe from there, and then yeah, we've just been bouncing around.
Have you ever been in Norway?
No, not
You're
yet.
close. You're very close.
I
You're
know.
very close.
It's so close. It's like it's so close, but not that close.
I
Like you
know.
look at like you
I
have
know.
to kind of go up and around or
Yeah.
across.
It's all the
But
mountains. There's so much like it's not like easy in some places in the world where you have like trains just going
no,
where you
yeah,
want to go and
there's not like a direct. Yeah, it's I've
yeah.
been looking though because
Yeah.
I'm a lot of my family on my mom's side is from Sweden and Denmark, so I'm really excited. I haven't been to either country yet, so I'm really excited to start kind of exploring this region of the world a little bit more. But yeah, it's awesome.
Cool. Well, now you have two countries you can visit and you have people that will meet you there.
Thank you. Love it.
Yeah. That's so cool. Should we jump into some topics that we're going to do today?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're actually going to go into Rings of Power because we have some stuff we need to talk about. There are some theories going around, specifically Celeborn theories. And you, Matilda, you did ask our followers on Instagram about this, like if they had some theories. And we will get into that. I just thought first, I want to hear you guys talk about your theories. So I'm really excited. Who wants to start talk about what theories? Because Celeborn has not been introduced to the series other than, you might have to correct me here, Mathilda, but other than Galadriel saying that he just disappeared and she doesn't know where he is. Is that correct? From how I
Yes.
remember it? Yeah, that's the only sentence we have, like he disappeared. And there's been a lot of hits, or I don't know, about that he might show up, and it's burning in the community about theories and thoughts and everything. So, Matilda, you know what to do.
Well, I figure, I mean, because Celeborn is he's not as important as Galadriel. We have to admit this, because she's one of the most important characters in the books. But in the context of the series, considering her character growth, I think Celeborn is going to be very important. But we don't know where he is, like you said, Elisa, and we don't know how he's going to be introduced back into the universe, or when, or who is going to play him. We have some hints, like you said. We have Jamie Campbell-Bower, who is playing a highborn knight in season 3. He's not going to play Thranduil. That's all we know. And as time has gone by, it seems he's going to play an elf. And so that leaves us with 2 options, which is 1, Glorfindel, the elf that was replaced by Arwen in Fellowship, because it was Glorfindel originally who saved Frodo and brought him to Elrond's house in the books, but he's not in the movies. So it's either Glorfindel or it is Celeborn. So without further ado, we have you here, Amber, because you have an amazing, rich, complex theory that we have brought you on. Yes, she's breaking the furniture.
Everything over.
I just spilled my drink because I got really excited.
So, I mean, that is the reason why you're here, because you have really researched. You have gone into all the corners, the nooks and crannies of Tolkien's work. And please share with us.
Give it to me, Amber. Give it to me.
Yes.
I want to know.
So I got curious about the idea of combining Celeborn with Glorfindel into one character, because as we know from Tolkien's writings, there isn't that much substantive that's written about Celeborn, which doesn't mean that he's not a substantive character himself. It just means that, like, that substance didn't make it into the extant records. So it leaves a lot of room for creators to kind of fill in. And kind of the way that I've been coming at all of this, which I get really excited about with Rings of Power, is looking at the narrative structure of it. Because one of the things that there's 2 things that Tolkien used in his work. One is chiastic structure, which is called a ring composition, where most kind of modern action movies have this structure of narrative where you have this, like, increasing crisis up to, like, the major crisis of the movie, and then you have this resolution, and so you have this, like, very linear build to the main crisis, and then you have some resolution, but the crisis usually happens towards the end, and it's a very kind of like linear build up to that. Whereas chiastic structure forms this ring, right? So you have, like, the beginning, and then it kind of goes around in a circle to a turning point, and then it comes back to that same beginning again. So what you see with chiastic structure is a lot of parallels and reflecting parallels. So you might have the characters are being rescued by eagles from one crisis on one side of the ring, and then on the other side of the ring, maybe they're being rescued from the ground. So by air, then by ground. And so there's different ways that Tolkien has done this, and both Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit exhibit chiastic structure. So when you know that that structure is there, I started looking for it in Rings of Power, and it was there. And I got really excited about that, because I thought, wow, they're not just honoring the source material based on, like, the names of the characters and the actual plot points, but they're also honoring it in terms of the structure, which is incredible, because that chiastic structure is a very ancient one. It was used in a lot of the older mythologies because of that oral tradition. So it was much easier to remember a ring structure with those parallels and those mirrors and the repetition of certain images and words. Yeah, Mathilda.
So for most of us, I've heard the term before, but could you maybe you're going to exemplify what you mean by this? Do you have any examples from seasons 1 and 2 where you've
Yeah.
noticed
So
this?
let me see. I have one. Let me bring up one from if you guys bear with me for just a
Oh, no
second. I've
problem.
got a good one from Numenor.
Mm-hmm.
Um So there's a lot of parallels. Like, for example, in season 1, we see an initial confrontation between Galadriel and Halbrand on the raft, and then at the end, there's a confrontation on the raft. And ultimately,
Right.
they're not exactly the same, but that's kind of the point. And I'm trying to bring up this other. I have another one. Let's see. I want to get it right so that I'm not. Oh, where is it? I should have had this ready. Sorry.
No problem. Because
Don't
this
worry
is a
about it,
very
Amber.
common way of telling a story that you actually repeat.
Yeah.
I mean, because I've noticed this in Tolkien a lot, because there's a lot of eagles in
Mhm.
in different situations, and they do different things. And there are dragons. That's like a repeated motif.
Yeah.
And like you said, the confrontations between Sauron and the hero, or Morgoth, and vice versa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's what's really cool about it, and you see this in Tolkien's work, is there's layers of this. So there's chiastic structure on the level of plot. So what's
Mm-hmm.
actually happening to the characters, and even just the name there and back again is descriptive of chiastic structure. You
Right.
go there to the turning point and come back again. And then there are also thematic layers to this. So one of in Rings of Power, we see on the thematic level, we have at the beginning when Galadriel gets to Numenor, and this is just a thematic level. I'm going to try to find this other one on the plot points, but like let's see. Thematically, you have Galadriel coming into the island of Numenor,
Yeah.
and there's all of this hostility between elves and men.
Mm-hmm.
So there's obviously a rift between elves and men, but then we see that the the story comes around into an alliance of elves and men, which leads to a defeat, which then brings it back to a more stronger division between elves and men. So you see that chiastic structure thematically just in season 1.
Right.
And then even from what Finrod says to Galadriel in the beginning, in order to truly know light, sometimes you have to first touch the darkness.
Yeah.
That's already laying out the chiastic structure for the narrative rings of Galadriel and Sauron. So Sauron's ring is to go, he has to come from darkness to touch light and then come back to darkness again, whereas Galadriel is coming from light to touch darkness and light again. And the reason this is important, in my opinion, for their characters is that it's not just to find the light, but it's also to step into your true agency, because for Galadriel, she has to ultimately, as we know, step into the light in her role as a guardian of Middle Earth. And in order for her to truly choose light with full agency, she has to know what it is to be to embrace the darkness. Because if virtue is never challenged, is it actually virtue, right? Like if you don't know anything other than light, can you actually actively choose it? And it's the same for Sauron. He doesn't become truly evil. I mean, let me step back. He's a pretty bad dude to begin with, let's be honest. But arguably, I think there's a sound argument to be made that Sauron, at the turn of the second age, the dawn of the second age, when Morgoth is defeated, Sauron is still not as evil as Morgoth. And even Tolkien says this, because for a couple of things. One is Sauron's actually willing to serve someone other than himself. Like that already sort of makes him like one step removed. And then what's interesting, I think, is Tolkien was very specific in his wording. And when he discusses Melkor and Sauron, it's that Melkor seduced him. Like Sauron didn't take a particularly active role. I mean, ultimately he did choose to go with Morgoth, but it was more that Morgoth was doing the corrupting and then Sauron was going along with it. But then what happens through the Second Age is we see that Sauron actively chooses the darkness. Now, he can't, just like the Galadriel, he can't actively choose the darkness and become as evil as he does unless he has a genuine option to choose light.
Right.
Right? Because if he never has the option to choose light, is he really that bad of a guy? Well, Tolkien says yes. So, and the other thing that's really interesting is that Tolkien uses the word relapse in here.
Mm-hmm.
So he talks about how Sauron relapses into darkness, which implies that, okay, he was in darkness and there was some kind of a rehabilitation period in order for there to be a relapse. So in terms of theme and character development, so, we can see thematically like the themes of alliance, of exile, of division playing out on like kind of a higher level. Then you have this lower level of character development. And then you can even go down to plot. So let's see, this is one example, and I was just playing with this stuff, so this might not be a great example, but
Hit us.
So in the beginning, so in season 1, it seems like Galadriel's betrayed by Elrond, and then she later gets pulled from the water by Halbrand, which those mirrors with Elrond feeling betrayed by Galadriel at the end, because she has, if you recall, she's standing there with Celeborn. They've just made the rings, and Elrond walks into the room with the scroll, realizing that Halbrand wasn't who he said he was, and Galadriel didn't tell him. So in the beginning, she's betrayed by him. At the end, he's betrayed by her. In the beginning, she's pulled from the water by Halbrand. At the end, she's pulled from the water by Elrond. In Númenor, Halbrand loses control. In the end, Sauron loses control when he's in her mind, and she starts to walk away from him, and he's like, come back to me, and he's, look at me. And then finally on the raft, he completely loses control. And then in Númenor, at the beginning, we see him lose control with the guild members and that epic fight scene. In Númenor, in the beginning, Galadriel offers Halbrand a crown.
Yeah.
In the end, he offers her a crown. Halbrand creates objects of empowerment in the forge. So when he's in Númenor, he's creating objects of power in a sense, because they're not magical objects of power, but they're objects like knives and swords, which enhance the physical power of somebody in a fight, right? So like he's using, in Númenor, and I think he's sort of taking the approach of recovering from his addiction to power in Númenor. So I think that he's using subcreation or smithing as a way of exerting internal control and kind of like channeling an outlet for that desire for power. So he's kind of making objects of power just enough to like satisfy that need, but he realizes at that time, I think, that he needs that outlet in order to prevent himself from like spiraling into that addiction. But then at the end, we see he's coming back to that addiction. He's been nudged back to it. And so now he's helping forge objects of power in the forge at Eregion. And those are objects of power with the intent of, of domination and of ultimately like creating his plan. So those are two mirrors. And then we see in Númenor in the beginning, Galadriel is seeking support from the queen to save men. And then in Eregion, Galadriel is seeking support from the king to save elves with the Rings of Power, because she's asking Gil-galad and trying to get him to agree to make the Rings of Power. And then Halbrand rides with Galadriel to the Southlands. Then they have their battle and defeat, and then Halbrand rides with Galadriel to Eregion. So, and you can see like these are just like randomly, selectively pulled out pieces of the plot, but there's even a whole ring that happens in Númenor that's exactly like this. Like Halbrand gets in this fight with the locals. Galadriel has a fight with the locals, but they're totally different and reflecting, right, in Númenor. And so I can't find that one. I'll keep looking, but if I do find that, I'll bring it up. But I want to turn it over to you guys because that was a really long monologue. Yes, Mathilda.
Maybe we should move back to Celeborn and how that is sort of connected to this. Sorry. What's the word you've been using? I have heard it, but it's like I can't visualize what it's written. So please, chiastic structure,
but we can just call it ring composition because both terms are
which is very fitting, ring composition.
Exactly.
So, how is this connected to Celeborn and Glorfindel and all that? Please
Right.
share
Okay.
your theories.
So when you go back and you look at the Silmarillion or Lord of the Rings and you're looking for this chiastic structure, you see these rings happening. The other piece of this that Tolkien uses is called mythic recursion. So you see even the repetition of specific rings happening throughout the book. So like as an example, like take Beren and Tuor, for example. So Beren is separated from his family. Tuor is separated from his family. Both wander as solitary exiles for some period of time until some supernatural event prompts them to go into a hidden kingdom. So they're not the same story. They're not the same characters. There's lots of variation, but these certain elements are still there and repeating themselves. So what I did was I kind of looked at the structure that I could see in Rings of Power and was looking for, okay, where are the parallels? Where could there be parallels with Glorfindel and Celeborn?
I am absolutely fascinated by all this information. I am just blown away with the thought pattern and the research and like putting pieces together. That it's really interesting to listen, and I look forward to like watching Rings of Power again and just putting those pieces into what I'm watching. I hope it will give that extra interesting
Layer.
perspective.
Yeah.
Layer, yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I have noticed this. The word I was looking for was recurring motifs. Eagles, they're a recurring motif. Dragons, and like you say, there are these circle structures, and it's fascinating. And sometimes it may seem like a cheap way of writing a story, but it's not. It's very intentional, and nothing is ever the same. It's like you always talk about history repeating itself, but it never happens exactly the same way. And I think that's where we can notice traces or similarities between what's happening right now in our world and think to ourselves, things are really going to go south soon. We're going to end up in the same place as we did 70, 80 years ago. But we have the advantage of having all this information already, of being aware. So we may be able to change things. And I think that's what we can learn from Tolkien and his writing as well, that nothing ever happens exactly the same way again. And that's a very important lesson to be learned.
I love what you just said, though, and that was even something that was in the Ainulindale, I think, because that's that I'm going to butcher the quote, but it was basically like, with each new theme, Iluvatar revealed something new and more wonderful. So even the Ainur couldn't predict what would happen because as the world unfolded, there was always something new and more wonderful than they could ever have imagined. And that's, I think, getting to the core of what you guys were just saying.
Yeah. So getting back to Celeborn and Glorfindel, like
Yes.
what have you found? We're so curious.
Okay. I'll try to walk you through my thought process and keep it somewhat brief, but what I was first struck by was how when the stranger goes to Rhûn and encounters Tom Bombadil, the name of the episode was Eldest. And I immediately thought about, where have I heard that before? And of course, Tom Bombadil in the books is known as Eldest. But so is Fangorn, the Ent.
Oh, right.
So Celeborn refers to him as Eldest in The Lord of the Rings, and Gandalf describes him as the oldest of all living things, which of course is somewhat of a contradiction with Tom Bombadil, but we'll just put Tom Bombadil like in his own enigmatic category.
Yeah.
But it occurred to me that this would be a really interesting parallel where Celeborn, who's been missing, might also encounter an eldest. And then I went back to Rings of Power and noticed how when Nori and the stranger were wandering in Rhûn and they discover that they're walking in circles and that there's an enchantment on the land, they keep coming back to a tree.
Right.
So in the Fellowship, the hobbits go into the Old Forest, and the Old Forest continues to move around them so that no matter where they tried to go, they keep ending up back toward a tree, which is Old Man Willow, where they finally encounter Tom Bombadil. So I thought, well, this would be an interesting way to reflect that, where Celeborn might be going through Fanghorn, an enchanted wood, where he keeps getting pushed back toward a tree, Fanghorn the Ent, and encountering eldest. And what was interesting was when I started looking into this, there is a Tolkien had a couple of notes how on Fanghorn actually encountered the king of Lorien way back in the day, and they made an agreement that everyone could pass freely between the two realms, but the two realms, Fanghorn Forest and Lothlorien, would be separate realms. So there's this textual evidence for a king of Lorien encountering Fanghorn. So then I started working backwards from there, and I was thinking, okay, well, if Celeborn and Glorfindel become one character, how would Celeborn end up in Fanghorn Forest, and how could this work, with what we know about Celeborn and Glorfindel? And I actually, going back into the Silmarillion and the First Age, it works really beautifully, because we could imagine a situation where Celeborn leaves Doriath in secret, and anything that anyone does in secret, right, isn't going to make it into the air quotes elvish records. So that creates this sort of like the records as unreliable narrator, because they're limited in scope and perspective, give creators like the writers of Rings of Power these opportunities to kind of like make these backstories that aren't necessarily explicit in the books. So there is this kind of possibility where Celeborn leaves Doriath in secret to go to Gondolin and to warn Turgon about what's happening, and to rally Turgon to join the battle at the Battle of the Unnumbered Tears. And in the Silmarillion, Turgon joins that battle, and everyone's kind of surprised to see him, but they're very happy because he comes in at this very crucial moment. And in the books, it's Glorfindel who is fighting with Turgon and defending their retreat to Gondolin. But it's possible if we combine Celeborn. So Celeborn goes from Doriath in secret, goes to Gondolin, warns Turgon, fights in the Battle of Unnumbered Tears. So this plays into the idea that Galadriel would think, oh, he went to war. So she would know that Celeborn went to Gondolin with the intent of bringing Turgon into the war. So she's like, okay, Celeborn's gone to war. He retreats with Turgon into Gondolin. And after that battle, Turgon ceases, he shuts Gondolin off from the rest of the world. So nobody can leave and nobody can come in. And they don't even, Tolkien even says they don't get much news, and what news they do get is very limited from the Eagles, and then Turgon doesn't really give it any credence. So it's quite possible then that Galadriel doesn't know what happened to him after that battle, because she never gets news back about what's happened, if he's survived it, and all she knows he was going to go fight in this battle. It was a devastating battle, and she doesn't hear from him again. But no one is allowed to leave Gondolin after that battle. So then, if Celeborn is still taking Glorfindel's part in this, when Morgoth attacks Gondolin, Celeborn/Glorfindel would have fought in defense and then protected the refugees as they escaped Gondolin. And as we know, Glorfindel battles a Balrog, trying to protect the refugees in their escape from Gondolin, and then dies, falling into abyss. The eagles bear up his body. Now, Tolkien actually wasn't sure for a while if Glorfindel from that First Age was the same as the Glorfindel that he wrote in Lord of the Rings, but he ultimately decided that he was. So that means that Glorfindel becomes re-embodied at some point. And this is perfect for Celeborn, right? Because this is more reason that Galadriel hasn't heard from him, even though he's her life's love. It's not like he's ignoring her. And it gives more time for them to be apart. So he's in Valinor being re-embodied. Glorfindel, in Glorfindel's story, is re-embodied in Valinor and becomes a student of Olorin, who's Gandalf, which is this other really beautiful connection. So now if Celeborn is in Valinor and he becomes a student of Gandalf, this is another, why he and Galadriel are so close with Gandalf later, as we know. The other thing that happens is Glorfindel's character becomes ultimately almost as powerful as the Maiar in Valinor because he is training with Olorin and kind of soaking up that light of Valinor, which we know is very restorative and strengthening. So Tolkien said that Glorfindel was sent back to Middle-earth around the same time as Gandalf. And Gandalf, as part of the Istar, was sent back to help fight Sauron, but Glorfindel's purpose in coming back was specifically to help Elrond and Gil-galad in their part of the fight. So again, this works really, really well with Rings of Power.
Yeah.
So going back to the parallels, the stranger comes back and we know that he loses his memory as he comes back to Middle-earth. Gandalf, or the stranger, comes to Middle-earth by fire, right? In this giant fireball.
Yeah.
Which we know is not the consumptive flame of Morgoth, but it's, as Gandalf later says when he's fighting the Balrog, he wields the flame of Anor. So this is the flame of Anor that's bearing him to Middle-earth, and he falls to Middle-earth protected by the flame of Anor. He will ultimately wield the Ring of Fire.
Right.
And wield the flame of Anor. So it makes sense then that Celeborn or Glorfindel would come by water, not because Celeborn is going to wield a Ring of Power, but because he is going to be the main support for Galadriel, who does. And we know that being a ring bearer is a monumental, burdensome task that is incredibly taxing. And if you think about it, Círdan starts with the Ring of Fire and then gives it to Gandalf. Gil-galad starts with the Ring of Air and gives it to Elrond. Galadriel starts with the Ring of Water and keeps it. Right? So, like, of all of the ring bearers, she's the one that has borne it the longest, which means it would have weighed on her and worn on her more than anybody else. And my personal theory, because I really like Celeborn and Galadriel, is that the reason she was able to do that was through her relationship with Celeborn, because Tolkien is all about relationship, and people are more successful and thrive better when they're together than when they're isolated and on their own. So I think it makes sense that Celeborn would come back to Middle-earth by water because of his part in supporting Galadriel in her task to bear that ring. There's also a note from Tolkien that Glorfindel probably came back to Middle-earth by a Númenórean ship. So we heard little hints in season 1 from Elendil and from Isildur about Isildur's brother Anarion. And that he was some kind of, there's some friction with him and his father. He's a rebel. He's going to the West. Obviously, he's like really, among the faithful. And Elendil is trying to still be faithful to the queen, even though there's this rift with the faithful, capital F. So I'm imagining that there could be this parallel where Elendil encounters Galadriel, the elf, in the sea, and takes her to Númenor. And in parallel, his son Anarion encounters this elf, Glorfindel Celeborn, in the sea, and then takes him to Middle-earth. And both of them do that because they are among the faithful and they believe the sea is always right. So Anarion takes Celeborn to Middle-earth. Then I was thinking, okay, but where would he take him? Because Pelargir, we know, is already hostile to elves, and Anarion would know this, right? So the only place at that point I think that makes sense is this little known place called I think it's Eladon, and it was an elf haven, and it's mentioned a few times in a few different places, so it obviously has some significance. But essentially it's this right at the mouth of the river that leads to the paths of the dead. So if my theory pans out, Celeborn basically does the reverse of Aragorn's journey in Lord of the Rings. So he goes from the sea through the White Mountains, through the paths of the dead, and then across what will become the Gap of Rohan into Fanghorn. And again, I'm just trying to figure out, like, how do I make these pieces fit? But I'm really excited about this because it opens the door to possibly an encounter with the Druidine,
Yes.
um,
Okay. So,
which would be really cool. Yeah.
so I was just going to say, I just noticed a few differences, a few changes that would have to be made because Glorfindel, obviously, he went into Valinor in the first age, and
Mhm.
with Rings of Power is obviously taking place in the second age, while in reality, in canon, Gandalf and Glorfindel return in the third age, but they have obviously
Mhm.
made that change for, obvious reasons. You have to condense the storyline. It's not going to work otherwise. You would have to focus on the elves only and uh, disregard all humans because they don't live for
Yeah.
hundreds and thousands of years. So I think that's a wise choice. So the Druidine. Elise, have you heard of the Druidine ever before?
I have, but only like very little, so I cannot describe it to you or anything, but I've definitely heard about it. So, but I'm sure you guys can tell me about it. Teach me.
Um, I get so excited about this stuff, you guys. So, like, please feel free to jump in and cut me off if I'm going too far down a
Well,
tangent.
don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Okay, so do you want to go
Okay.
first? Go ahead, Amber.
Oh, for the Druidine?
Yeah.
Sure, I can chat about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the Druidine, they're really this kind of obscure branch of men,
Mm-hmm.
and we sort of assume that they're a branch of men. That's kind of what Tolkien implied. But they're mentioned in the Lord of the Rings and in the Lord of the Rings they're known as the Wild Men. And they're smaller in stature. But there's a whole section in Unfinished Tales that's devoted to the Druidine. Yeah, exactly. Very nice.
It's just
And
Matilda showing off her Unfinished Tales book for everyone. Just
yes.
like casually going, look.
And in that book, Tolkien tells a couple of fables about them, which are super interesting because the fables imply that the Druidine actually had a form of Osanwe, so they had a form of long distance mind to mind communication. They hated orcs, absolutely hated orcs,
Mm-hmm.
hunted them with, a passion, but they really didn't do any kind of violence to anybody else, only orcs. And they knew all kinds of poisons, but they would only use those to counteract the poisons of the orcs, and they would only use their poisons on orcs because they would never use them on anything else.
Yeah.
They also were known to uh, live with Haleth, the people of Haleth in the First Age in
Right.
Beleriand, and they were they worked not worked, but they served as guards for Haleth. Yeah,
So
Matilda.
for those who don't know, there were three groups of men who arrived.
Yes.
It was the House of Hador, Hador, I don't know exactly how to pronounce, the House of Beor, and then the House of Halef. And you're talking about the House of Halef. And they were, by the
Yes,
way,
House of Haleth.
light-haired and pretty pale-skinned, we should add. While the House of Beor, interestingly, which I've written about, they were much like more olive-skinned and dark hair. And you have someone like Elrond and also Aragorn, who are descendants of that house, and that's why they have dark hair, and vice versa.
Yes. So the Druidine had one of the things that they were known for was they would carve these sculptures that looked like themselves, so like sculptures of small men of small stature. And the sculptures were believed to have the powers of the person who sculpted them. And there's one of the fables tells a story of how one of these sculptures actually defends a family of Druidine while the creator was gone. And they call them watchstones, which I find very interesting because that sounds a whole lot like the Palantiri, right? Because they believed that when they carved these stones, like if they carved a guard stone and left it in a place and then walked, however far away, that they could still see what that watchstone saw, and that watchstone could come alive and, for the purposes of defense, if need be, which is super interesting. And so when Aragorn comes through the paths of the dead, leading into that tunnel beneath the mountains are all of these statues, which they attribute to the Druidine, and that people no longer inhabits that area. by the time Lord of the Rings comes around, they inhabit like a small part of the forest, and they end up providing some really crucial help to the Rohirrim um, during the ride of the Rohirrim. And this part of the Lord of the Rings is really cringe because in the interactions between the Rohirrim and the Druedain come across in the writing as just incredibly primitive, and they're speaking this very, you know,
Yeah, so they really speak a very primitive language, guttural, it says, and they're also very much, they remind me of some sort of troll figure. Like they have
yeah.
pretty short limbs, they're pretty stout and dark. They have like dark, they just sound like they're really ugly, which is
Hmm.
so, I don't know, it icks me a little bit, that description.
It does.
And when you read that description, in although they are heroic because they serve the heroes, they
Hmm.
help the heroes out, they help them
Yes.
find a path. I was reading this chapter to my son just maybe a week or two ago, so I just read this. They help the Rohirrim find a quicker path to get into Minas Tirith, to help Minas Tirith on time before it falls. So they're very
Right.
crucial for the story. Um, but they have such a rich culture, which
Hmm.
is not described in, it doesn't come across in Lord of the Rings, in Return of the King, but it does come across when you read Unfinished Tales. Yeah, so it's very
Yeah.
interesting. So I agree with you that there's so much more to the Druedain, or the Pukelmen, as they refer to
Hmm.
often, than what meets the eye when you read the original
Right.
story. Yeah. So keep
And
going.
I think this is such a rich area because I think Tolkien was making a point here. One of the things he says about them is that they had this really rich knowledge base. Like they were as if not more knowledgeable than the elves, but they never hoarded their knowledge. They always shared their knowledge. They always shared everything. And pretty much the only animosity that they ever demonstrated for anything was only against the orcs. They were
Yeah.
always willing to help others and teach others, which in Tolkien's world we know is such a virtuous, moral stance. Like we see that most of the corruption starts to happen when people start to hoard, but he goes out of his way to describe this culture that has all of the moral goodness of that world, and yet they don't look pretty, they don't sound
Yeah.
pretty. They don't have all the kind of characteristics that we typically associate with like the heroes and the good guys.
Yeah.
And then the way that they're treated by the Rohirrim is also like cringe because the Rohirrim, because the Druedain and the Pukelmen, they're speaking a language that's not theirs. And so they're going out of the way to speak this language with the Rohirrim so the Rohirrim can understand them. And it sounds very stunted and primitive, but that's only because they're going out of their way to speak somebody else's language. And I think that Tolkien was making this point, that a layered point, that the Rohirrim were prejudiced basically because they had this limited understanding and perspective of this culture. And then we as the readers, again, this is that unreliable narrator, kind of take on the perspective of the Rohirrim because that's the perspective taken by the records and the books. And we don't, it calls us readers out when we read it like that, because it's like, oh, hey, wait a minute. Like, I'm falling for this other person's bias
Yeah.
just because they happen to be the narrator.
Yeah.
And it forced, like, if you take a beat, he's kind of calling the audience out for our own biases. Like, he's sort of calling attention to, like, hey, just because these characters aren't written as beautiful and ethereal doesn't mean that they aren't potentially the moral backbone of the whole story.
Yeah.
That's really
Definitely.
interesting because the minute you talked about Rohirrim, I was just like, oh yeah, those I remember them from the book.
Hmm.
When you talked about all these really cool stuff about them earlier on, I was like, oh, I haven't heard about this. And then you talked about the Rohirrim, I was like, hang on, I remember
Yeah.
them being like these dirty, primitive, almost non-proper speaking people.
Hmm.
Again, that's calling me out for my for my ignorance, but that's really interesting reflection and point of making them a much more wholesome people than the very almost, maybe I'm wrong, but like a bit more flat picture that I remember from the book. I haven't read them many times, actually just once, but so thank you. That was a very
Yeah.
Yeah.
thorough insight into that. Thank you.
Yeah.
They are also very in tune with nature, these people.
Yes.
They are so connected to nature. It's like they're part of nature. It's like the description of them. They are, I feel like they're less human and more, you know,
Yeah.
they are so connected to living things. And that's why they can, stand still and observe for days, watching, guarding. And they have an understanding that people like the Rohirrim don't have, which is interesting.
Right.
And when I think of, it, I've lived in Australia, which maybe to some people listening to this podcast might explain why is she trying to fake some sort of weird accent here. I lived in Sydney for a year, and I also spent 7 years babysitting for a family from Melbourne. And living in Australia, I came in contact with a lot of Aboriginals, beautiful people, and finding out more about their culture, about the richness of their culture and their story, it was very, very, very fascinating, and it gave me a much bigger perspective on their story. And so when I think of the Druidine, I think of, for example, the Aboriginals of Australia. It really reminds me, or of any other indigenous people. It could be the
Right.
Native Americans, or it could be the Inuits, or the Samis here in Scandinavia. Very much like they have a deep connection with what's going on around them, spiritually and like even physically, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah. And then that gets misunderstood and misconstrued as simplistic and primitive when it's so sophisticated and it's so
Yeah.
rich. And I think that's I personally am really excited at the idea that they might be able to include the Druidine for that reason, because at this point in the history of Middle Earth, we would be seeing kind of the final remnants of that culture. You know, this is probably around the time that they departed the White Mountains, um, and left whatever culture was there that left those statues near the paths of the dead.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it would be almost redemptive of that part of Lord of the Rings to show at least some flavor, some taste of this old culture and in its richness, right? Even if it's in the tail end of it, I think it could be really, really cool. So that's my I'm like slightly wishful thinking part of my theory, but then that also gets Celeborn through the White Mountains. And
Yeah.
part of my theory is that at some point along the way he encounters Amroth, who will become the first king of Lorien
Mm-hmm.
and fight in the War of the Elves against the Alliance. So
Yeah.
I'll like super fast forward my theory here because I know Mathilda has a theory too, and I feel like I've just totally been dominating
Don't
the
worry about
conversation.
it. Don't worry about it.
So what's interesting about this whole tale that I've told up to this point about combining Celeborn and Glorfindel is it actually, up to this point, it parallels the cycle of Tuor. So Tuor is looking for the gate of the Noldor, and he encounters two elves who show him through the gate. And once he goes through the gate, he's on the shore at Vinyamar, and Ulmo appears to him and tells him, to go find Turgon in Gondor, and he gets all of the armor and the sword and everything. So what happened? So the way that this parallels that is, so Tuor is in exile from the caves where he grew up and goes to seek the gate of the Noldor. So in this sense, Celeborn / Glorfindel is exiled from Valinor.
Yeah.
And he's seeking a gate, a passage through the mountains to get to Fanghorn Forest. I think he might encounter an elf that might be Amroth, and Amroth is a Sylvan elf, we know.
Yeah.
And there were Sylvan elves living at Edelond, that port city, at this time. So maybe Amroth accompanies him and shows him the gate of the paths of the dead.
Mm-hmm.
I think that encountering the Druidine would be a parallel with the stranger encountering the hobbits, both characters encountering some smaller stature people that end up being instrumental and helpful that
Yeah.
also happen to be moral backbones of these stories.
Right.
um, and then Celeborn and Amroth, once they get through the White Mountains, that kind of concludes the cycle of the story that parallels Tor's cycle, and
Mm-hmm.
then starts the parallel cycle with Beren and Luthien. And at this point, then Celeborn becomes Beren and Galadriel his Luthien, and so he's in the White Mountains and decries afar, as Beren decries afar Doriath, the Hidden Kingdom. Celeborn decries afar what will become Lorien, but at that time is probably a connected forest between Fanghorn and Lorien. And then goes down and, terrible was his southward journey was Beren's story, and in this case it would be terrible was his northward journey, and eventually gets into Fanghorn. Now, one of the things that also happens in Fanghorn is in Lord of the Rings, Gandalf, after he's been resurrected, parallel,
Mm-hmm.
goes to Fanghorn. So Gandalf fights a Balrog, dies, is resurrected, and goes to Fanghorn. Celeborn / Glorfindel fights a Balrog,
Mm-hmm.
dies, is resurrected, goes to Fanghorn. When Gandalf is in Fanghorn is when Frodo is on Amon Hen, and
Mm.
he's being tempted by the Dark Lord. And he hears two voices in his head, and one, and he's resisting, but he can't tell if he's resisting or if he's saying, "Verily I come to thee." And he feels the pull of the Dark Lord, but he hears another voice, and the other voice says, "Take off the ring, you fool." That's Gandalf striving against
Yeah.
Sauron in mind from Fanghorn. So the parallel here would be Galadriel is in actual battle with Sauron on this peak overlooking. So Amon Hen is a peak.
Mm-hmm.
So Galadriel is battling Sauron at the end of season 2 on this peak above Eregion.
Mm.
And at the very end, when Sauron is saying, "Galadriel, give the rings to me," in her mind, she's starting to give them to him. And then we see her retract them, and then she takes the ring off. "Take the ring off, you fool." She takes the ring off, starts to hand it to him, but then retreats.
Yeah.
So I think this is, again, going back to Celeborn, his whole purpose and task is to support her in her task, that he's actually in Fanghorn striving against Sauron to help her in this crucial moment out of love, the way that Gandalf is out of love helping Frodo
Mm-hmm.
in his battle against Sauron on Amon Hen. And we see when she falls from the cliff, and there's an overhead view of her
Mm-hmm.
that's blurred around the edges. That is an exact description of what images look like when looking through a Palantir.
Yeah.
And so I'm just going to creatively extend that to any kind of long distance mind vision. And I think that's Celeborn's long distance mind vision looking down upon her
Yeah.
in love and concern, because he was striving with Sauron to help her resist the darkness. And when Frodo is stabbed by the Morgul blade, Gandalf tells him, "The reason that it didn't pierce your heart is because you resisted until the last."
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the exact same thing happens with Galadriel. So it doesn't pierce her heart. She's able to resist to the last, but because she didn't have to do it alone, because Celeborn was with her.
Right. Oh my God.
And
Wow. Wow.
and that part would be, so in Beren and Luthien, Beren actually comes across Luthien in person in the forest, but I think that this is a way of Beren coming across his Luthien in his mind. And so he has a vision of her while he's in Fanghorn, and then strives and then helps her. And then after that, he encounters Eldest. And similarly, we know that the stranger has visions of Nori and Poppy when he's with Tom Bombadil, and he's concerned about them. So I think that that's kind of tying in that parallel as well.
Yeah.
So that's my and I don't think so. Mathilda, you were sharing part of your theory, and I think what I'm really excited about is all of this I'm constructing sort of based on the structure. So where are the parallels? How could this okay, this is the Twar cycle, this is the Beren cycle. How does this mirror the cycle with the stranger? How does it tie in all of that? And where you were coming from was character development, which I was really excited about. But I think that all of this happening, I think we're going to see it in the prologue, the same way that we saw Sauron's flashback leading up to when he actually met with Galadriel in person.
Yeah.
So I think that we're going to see Celeborn's flashback, all of this history leading up to the moment where he actually meets her in person. And I think he is actually going to... you guys remember how everybody kept referring to her as a horse in the dialogue? Like,
Yeah.
Halbrand was like, oh, colt in full gallop. And then Pharazôn is like, oh, I'd sooner kneecap a stallion. And then Elrond is like, oh, he could ride you to victory, which, oh my God, how awkward was that quote? But I think that they're setting her up to be a character parallel with a horse character. And
Right.
when Gandalf the White is striving with Frodo, shortly
Yeah.
after he's in Fanghorn, he summons Shadowfax.
Right.
And Shadowfax comes to him, and then they ride off to battle together. So I think that Celeborn is going to summon Galadriel, and she will sort of be the Shadowfax that comes potentially through Moria to Lothlorien. And I think that since Amroth is with Celeborn, she and Celeborn will set up Amroth to lead in Lothlorien while she and Celeborn go and do something.
So, Lisa, Amber was referring to or comparing Galadriel to a horse, because that's how they talk about her in a lot of season 1.
Horses? No.
Yeah,
What?
they just.
She
You
or-
mentioned a few examples that she's
Yeah.
galloping, and she is.
Oh, yeah.
She's like a stallion. La la la. Yeah, that was interesting.
And she even says to Halbrand, cease comparing me to a horse. It's just like, it's constant.
funny.
Like, everybody's calling her a horse.
Hey, maybe Celeborn is a horse. That's that. I mean, who knows?
Plot
Right.
twist.
Well, I think I was just saying, I think
plot twist,
they're setting it
Celeborn.
up for her. I know, right? That would be
Yeah.
so funny. Not combining him with Glorfindel, we'll combine him with Shadowfax.
Yeah. Or plot
Yeah.
twist, Celeborn is actually Beric. You know, the horse who
Oh my gosh.
saved Isildur from Shelob.
The thing is, though, I wouldn't be surprised, kind of, because this series has done a lot of weird changes, and it has done stuff that I just hadn't. I was like, oh, okay, and you're just riding the wave when it comes to that show. For me, at least, that's like
Yeah.
you just have to accept it for what it is. And
What's an example, though? What I'm super curious.
I don't. I do. Well, okay. For I don't think.
Go for
Okay,
it.
for me, this show is very much love-hate relationship. I liked it when I saw it the first time, and then I saw it again, and I'm like, oh, this is terrible. And then I saw it one more time, and I was like, nah, I'm gonna choose to like it. And it took a while for me to like, because there are parts of it that just, the script is really bad in many places, and I'm sorry. But
Don't
they've
apologize.
They've
It's all
done
good.
some stuff that's just not the best they could have done, in my opinion. But I've chosen to really enjoy the show. But yeah, I am not a fan at all about the fact that Gandalf is there. Like, I remember just being really disappointed, and I didn't really understand that choice. But I'm really intrigued about how they're moving on to show what this is going to be. I'm going to watch until the end. Like, I really will. Absolutely. With excitement.
Yeah.
I mean, and I really disliked, probably more than anything, the conversations between. I really liked Tom Bombadil. I think he was quite cool. I like that he was just the amount of perfect, childish, but at the same time, like, it worked because
Yeah.
you know how he is in the books, and I was just like, are they going to be able to have the perfect balance between, because it's a dark show, it's quite dark certain places, and but I wasn't very okay about the conversations between the stranger, Gandalf, and Tom. Is it the last episode or the second to last? episode where he kind of says the same quote that he says to Frodo in Moria. I
Mm-hmm.
really did not like that because I feel like Gandalf is wise enough to first of all bring that to the table for Frodo at that point. It's such a for me it's especially the Moria conversation. It's like probably the most holiest conversation for me in the whole trilogy. I'm talking about the films now specifically. And to take that and bring it into it made it so much more less special. The conversation between Gandalf and Frodo was the value of it became so less for me. So it bothered me.
Yeah.
Like it didn't come from Gandalf's heart as
Right.
like an original thought. The
Yeah.
way that it you imagine that in that moment when you
Yeah.
see that movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Stuff like that irritated me. But
Okay.
I really still enjoy this show somehow. I just like
Yeah.
I can it's for me, you said in the beginning, it's a if it's Middle Earth, I want to be in it, you know?
Yeah.
It's like
Yep.
it's just a excuse to be in the world and then I try to accept it for what it is. And of course, some things are going to irritate me, even piss me off. And some things are going to be like, "Oh, this is so cool," like the costumes and the music.
Yeah.
And Arondir's fighting skills. I mean, come on. I mean,
I know.
I mean, he needs a prize for that. That's a really good acting.
I think it says a lot about the show that it evokes such deep emotion in us. Like we care. Like if it were, I feel like if it were like really terrible, like no one would really care. Like we just couldn't even get invested in it in the first place. But like the fact that this upsets you, I feel like that's I mean, not that I wish anybody to be upset, but like I think it says something. It's like you're really you're invested in the material, like the source material, but you're also invested in the adaptations because they evoke something in us, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's like I don't think it's a bad thing.
Yeah.
Cool.
100%. Okay, Matilda.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask you, have you watched the scenes with Tom Bombadil and Gandalf more than once?
Mm-hmm. Twice.
Okay. Because I felt it was easier to understand the use of that line the second or the third time I watched it. But if anyone goes and checks out my profile and you read about my thoughts and feelings about the whole arc in Rhûn, I'm not very happy about it. So I can actually agree with you that they could have written a much better script to tell that story. And we might have accepted it more easily. I don't know. Anyway, so my theory is that I think that Celeborn is actually stuck in Rhûn. And I'm going to basically read out what I wrote the other day about this. Because Galadriel, she needs to start figuring out how to use magic because it's such an integral part of her character. And so, what better way than for her to learn alongside her future close friend, Gandalf, the Maya. In canon, she was trained by Melian, the Maya, in Duraev. And Melian famously conjured the girdle of Melian, a protective spell surrounding the kingdom of Duraev. And since Melian isn't present in the story, why not let another Maya, Gandalf, let me say that again. Why not let another Maya influence Galadriel's education in magic? Yeah, so that's my first point. And secondly, for that reason, it would make sense if Galadriel would hear rumors of Celeborn being in Rhûn and travel there, meeting Gandalf on the way. Or Gandalf meets Celeborn first in Rhûn and delivers him from captivity. Gandalf then might even be asked to join Celeborn as the latter travels to reunite with his wife. And thus Galadriel and Gandalf are introduced to each other. And for context, Rhûn is an eastern kingdom inhabited by a people labelled Easterlings in Tolkien's lore. Throughout the history of Middle-earth, these men have unfortunately joined forces with both Morgoth and later Sauron, frequently attacking Gondor. However, it should also be duly noted that the Blue Wizards, dwelling in Rhûn, in canon, inspired a rebellion against Sauron. What if the Dark Wizard actually is one of the Blue Wizards? Who knows? Regardless, it seems that the Dark Wizard has his people trapped under some spell or curse, if you will. And what if Celeborn is held captive under some forgetful spell? Although I might identify weaknesses in my theory here, because an immortal warrior, which he is, would most certainly stand out among the rest of the lot. Anyway, Celeborn might have forgotten about his previous life, and that's why he hasn't attempted to escape or return to Galadriel. And also, in my imagination, it would be absolutely epic if Galadriel went to Rhûn, teamed up and trained with Gandalf, and then with joint efforts, these two might defeat the Dark Wizard and release Celeborn from the power of the spell. Could you imagine just how amazing this moment might come across on screen? Like, my mind is like... It would also cement Gandalf as an ally to be counted on for the rest of Galadriel's days. And another argument for Galadriel going on a more solitary journey of discovery is the fact that she has a lot of healing to deal with. It's not that I can't see her on the battlefield anymore, but the fact that she needs a break from it, she does. And she needs to learn other ways of resisting the Dark Lord besides the sword and pure willpower. She needs to understand that this is her only way. If we contrast the moment when she leaps off of a cliff at the end of Season 2 with the moment when she not only saves her friend and ally, Gandalf, but also casts out the Necromancer, aka Sauron, from Dol Guldur in the Hobbit story, she still has a lot to learn in Rings of Power in the Second Age in order to master her magical abilities. Yet, the moments in The Hobbit also illustrate what Galadriel is capable of when realizing her full potential. So, her journey of self-discovery should urge her to harness the power of Ananya, because that's the only way for her to resist Sauron. And then finally, another character who might and probably should be involved in Galadriel's training would be Círdan the Shipwright. Considering Círdan's age and wisdom, he's less distracted by what's going on around him and more in tune with how the rings might be used for good. Círdan's sixth sense seems to be serving him and the other elves well, and therefore I believe he should guide Galadriel on her journey. Just like Gandalf has a longing inside of him that pulls him to Rhûn, what if Galadriel might have visions of her husband and his whereabouts? What if Círdan would guide her on her spiritual journey, seeming to be such a spiritual person himself? Indeed, Círdan is known for his gift of foresight, and this might be instrumental for Galadriel, since she also will become known as possessing that very same ability to foresee the future. And like you said, side note, Círdan will eventually gift Narya, the Fire Ring, to Gandalf. So there's a connection there as well. But anyway, my theory is not as refined.
I'm still so impressed by both of you, though. It's just, I don't have any theories. I just wonder why he's not there. And then when I tried to look up like information about Celeborn to see like, what could have happened? Like how can they, what are the script writers thinking? And I was like, there's nothing to find about Celeborn, basically. It's just, he's Galadriel's husband, boiled down. But so I'm so impressed by you guys.
I love, Mathilda, how your take basically goes, you're looking at the future, like, what are they going to need as characters to become the characters that we know they're going to become. And I love how you're piecing all of it together, because it's like, it's not just about Galadriel's power, but it's her connection with Gandalf. And one of the things I love is not even Gandalf can command the eagles, but Galadriel can. Like,
That's so true.
she's the only one in the entire Legendarium that commands the eagles. And so, like, how does she get from where she is now to there? And how do they become so close? And I love, and this is what I love about Rings of Power, is like, we can have these completely different theories, and yet both totally make sense based on different perspectives, like how you're looking at it, whether like structurally or character development wise. And it's so cool. It's so fun.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, Elisa,
Yeah.
you have a whole bunch of theories that we have dug up from the internet.
Yeah, the followers, I was going to read them. So you asked our wonderful, amazing, cool, awesome followers on Instagram. You guys are awesome. What their theories are. And here we have one. It says he could be a prisoner of some villain created for season 3. Madros. Yes. In Morgoth's hands comes to mind. This is another one. I also think he's in Rhûn, but I hope he makes a part of some kind of resistance against the wizard. There's another. Most likely in Middle-earth. Valinor is only open to those leaving Middle-earth, so he couldn't have sailed from Valinor. He lives somewhere amongst the elves and has no idea what awaits him in the form of Galadriel. Here's another. Hate to say it, but I think he did actually die and is in Valinor, but will be coming back with Glorfindel or shortly after Glorfindel comes back. There's a great theory on Reddit that's more about Glorfindel and that he should be coming back first, and that Jaime is likely playing him instead. I don't think Celeborn is shown till the end of season 3, as he's coming to help the elves. I like this one. Yeah.
I know.
That would be quite a reveal.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny, the fact that, Glorfindel and Celeborn keep popping up, which sort of supports your theory, because we have seen, both in Peter Jackson's adaptations, but also in Rings of Power, the mixing of characters, that, one trait is given to a different character because that serves the story better. For example, you have the really epic opening in Fellowship, which was originally spoken by whom?
Gandalf.
No, Treebeard.
Oh, was it really?
Yes.
Really? Oh my gosh, I totally thought it was
So
Gandalf.
the world is changing. I can feel it in the water. I can feel it in the air. That's Treebeard speaking in Two Towers. Yes. And,
Right. I think we're all thinking about the meme, the real that's going around.
Right.
Oh yeah, I was thinking about that one. That they did they did shoot Gandalf speaking those words, and then they changed to Galadriel. That's what I was thinking.
Yes.
Yeah, but
that's
you're right.
True. That's true. Yeah.
That's a trick question, Mathilda.
I'm sorry.
You got us.
I didn't know whether you knew about
us.
this or not. It's very nerdy. It's like very nerd knowledge. If you know, you know. It's not like it's not a trick question. Yeah. So examples like that you have, and there are other, like them removing Glorfindel and using Arwen instead for the same action.
Which, by the way, I actually love that. In the Fellowship in the books, Frodo actually calls upon Luthien to help him in that moment.
Right.
And so it actually evokes this really powerful image where, so in Beren and Luthien, Luthien is striving against Sauron on a bridge with Juan over a river. And here she is with Frodo striving against the dark. Here's Arwen striving against the dark across a river. So it evokes this image of Luthien in the moment that Frodo is calling upon Luthien to help him in this moment of crisis. So I actually kind of feel like there's this like poetic parallel in the way that Peter Jackson did that is more grounded in text than would it's not just that he replaced Glorfindel with Arwen. There's a textual and thematic basis there, even the visual parallels of Luthien and Arwen in that moment.
Very good points. Yeah. Cool.
I think we have to wrap it up because you, Amber, have to leave us.
Yeah. I have to go.
Thank you. I want to do a shout out, actually. I've been talking to someone on Instagram His name is Brian, and he's in Spain, and he's doing research on Virgil's Aeneid, is that the word? And classical Latin, and how it connects to Tolkien's work, and
Wow.
how it may have influenced Tolkien. And I'm telling you, this Instagram is amazing. It's the
Oh,
Western
cool.
Voyager. Like, everyone go into Instagram and read and discover all of the stuff that he has out. Like, his Instagram is amazing, and he's really cool. And the fact that he sent me a picture of The Hobbit in Latin. Like, that's really
Awesome.
cool. Yeah, it's really cool. So I just want to give a shout out because that account was really cool. I discovered, and that's what's really cool about this podcast, because you connect people. Like, you, Amber, connected with Matilda, and
Yeah.
yeah. And I'm so glad, Amber, that you joined us for the second
Oh my gosh.
episode.
Genuinely, this is such an honor. I was saying earlier, I feel a little bit starstruck being on with you too.
Oh
And so
my
I'm just
God, that's amazing.
like tickled to be here. Thank you.
So before we wrap up, before we say goodbye, so Elisa,
Yes.
where on the interwebs can our followers find you if they want to reach out to you and chat with you and ask about your shoe size or whatever?
Didn't I thought we said that in the first episode, but
Yeah, let's
my
repeat it.
my Instagram is, oh wow, it's my Norwegian name, so it's Elise Gulstol.
Yeah, it's in a description.
Yeah,
Yeah,
in the
it's
show
in a
notes.
description as well. And you'll find me in Lady Altariel of Lorien. It's also in our description. And then
And Amber, we will link Amber in.
yes. And
in
we'll obviously have an Instagram account for this podcast, and that's where you find both of our accounts. And
yeah, ladies
it's
of
Ladies
Lore.
of Lorien. And you have a very nerdy name. It's like
It's
crazy
super
nerd. It's like freaking out there. Hit us.
It's Loquendi Nerdy, and I
Yeah.
totally made it up. But basically, it was like just I like to talk about nerd things. So
That's so cool.
So it's like fake Latin or something, which is funny.
yep, totally fake Latin. Just like this girl talks way too much about nerdy things. Like that's
And we love nerdy things, don't we?
Yeah. So
Just
Elise
three nerdy
Gulestøl.
women. Yes.
Elise Gulestøl, that's your Instagram name. I'm Lady Altariel of Lorien, and you are Loquendi Nerdy.
Loquendi Nerdy. Yep.
Loquendi, sorry. Amazing.
I mean, honestly, it just depends on how you want to pronounce it.
Yeah,
I'm not picky.
cool.
So cool. Oh, okay. Thank you so much for this. I can't wait to see what actually Rings of Power will tell us about Celeborn, and if any of your theories are right. You will have to come back when we're doing review of season 3 of Rings of Power.
Oh my God, that'd be so fun.
Yeah.
Anytime. I'd love it.
Now that's put in the books. Let's do that.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Namarie.
Namaria.
Could said it better myself. Thanks, you guys.